I don't know that we can say anything is always a certain way. We've got a new administration. It's only been in the saddle, so to say, for about a month. And there is some good news. The good news is that President Trump wants to reach an agreement with President Putin on ending the war in Ukraine. Now, there has just been a meeting in Riyadh between Foreign Minister Lavrov and Secretary of State Rubio. Lavrov is actually speaking as we are talking here together, and he's saying the following. We've had a good meeting. We have broken good ground. We now understand each other. I think the Americans have a better understanding of us. And that's about it. And I don't think we should have expected too much more. I think there's a tendency, maybe that's the administration, but also in the media, to heighten expectations, to inflate expectations. The good news is as follows. President Trump clearly wants to normalize relations with Russia. He wants to put an end to this relationship characterized by hostility, sanctions, vicious threats, and so forth. He wants an end to all of that. It's very clear that the Russians welcome that. They are happy to normalize relations. And you had representatives of the financial system in Russia sitting across from representatives of the U.S. financial system, clearly someone like Mr. Witkoff, who is an oligarch, if you will, in his own right as a billionaire, is in a position to help and assist with that. And I think he's done good work for President Trump thus far in his capacity. So I think something good is going to come out of this, and I think that will be normalization of relations.
1 million dead, a country in ruins, billions wasted, vanished into thin air. And now, a deal that could have ended it all from the very beginning is suddenly back on the table? Is this peace or surrender? Douglas Macgregor paints a picture of a war that may have been prolonged unnecessarily, a catastrophe that could have been avoided. He suggests that the new administration is now pushing for peace, with high-level talks signaling a possible breakthrough. But here's the real question. Is this a genuine resolution, or just the final chapter in a war that was always doomed to end this way? As we reflect on the analysis of Douglas Macgregor's statements, it's clear that perspectives on the war in Ukraine remain deeply divided. While some argue that the war could have been avoided, others emphasize that the conflict is now shaping the global order in ways that few could have predicted. But as we enter the 4th year of this war, major political shifts are unfolding that could redefine its trajectory. The recent German elections, the evolving stance of the United States, and significant developments on the battlefield, especially in Sudzha, paint a complex picture of what lies ahead. Let's break it all down. On February 24th, 2022, Russian forces crossed into Ukraine, launching what they termed a special military operation. What followed was an intense and brutal conflict that has transformed Ukraine, Russia, and the global geopolitical landscape. Over the past 3 years, Ukraine has endured relentless bombardments, territorial losses, and enormous casualties. At the same time, Western nations have continued to provide military aid, economic support, and political backing to Kyiv. However, as we enter the 4th year of the war, there is a noticeable shift. Unlike previous years, in 2024, we are seeing renewed discussions about a possible negotiated settlement. The United States and Russia appear to be exploring potential avenues to bring the war to an end. Yet, Ukraine and the European Union remain steadfast in their position, insisting on restoring Ukraine's sovereignty through military means rather than diplomatic concessions. This growing divergence between Western powers and Ukraine itself is one of the most critical developments of the moment. Amid this evolving situation, the 2025 German elections have brought a major political shift. The Christian Democratic Union, CDU, under Friedrich Merz, has emerged victorious, replacing Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democratic Party. This is a significant development for Ukraine, as Merz and his party have signaled strong support for Kyiv, potentially even more than Scholz's administration did. Merz's rhetoric suggests that Germany will not only continue supplying military aid, but could escalate its commitments, including the potential provision of Taurus missiles to Ukraine. He has also advocated for greater European autonomy in security matters, even proposing that Germany, France, and the United Kingdom provide nuclear security guarantees to Ukraine. However, while Merz is taking a tough stance against Russia, he has also expressed skepticism about the United States' commitment to Ukraine. He has criticized Washington for what he perceives as indifference toward Ukraine's long-term future, raising concerns about the reliability of U.S. support. These statements indicate that the new German leadership will likely push for a more aggressive European approach to the war. This could mean increased pressure on European nations to ramp up weapons deliveries and financial support for Ukraine, potentially leading to further escalation rather than de-escalation. Meanwhile, Olaf Scholz has admitted defeat in the elections, placing his party in third place. His departure marks the end of a more cautious approach to military involvement in Ukraine, paving the way for a harder-line stance from Berlin. Interestingly, Donald Trump has publicly congratulated Merz and the CDU on their victory, calling it a great day for Germany. Trump noted that German voters have rejected the previous government's policies, particularly regarding energy and immigration. However, despite Trump's initial warm words, potential tensions between the U.S. and Germany under Merz's leadership could arise. Trump has long advocated for a reduction in U.S. involvement in European security, criticizing NATO members, especially Germany, for not contributing enough to defense spending. If Merz pushes for European strategic autonomy while continuing to demand U.S. aid for Ukraine, a rift could form between Washington and Berlin. At the same time, the United States' stance on Ukraine appears to be shifting. Recent reports suggest that Washington is now more focused on negotiations to settle the conflict rather than providing unlimited military aid. The latest draft agreements have even removed the word security, signaling a reduced U.S. commitment to long-term military support. Trump's special envoy, Wes Mitchell, has suggested that if a peace deal is reached, American companies could return to the Russian market, a major economic incentive for Washington. However, this would create a dilemma. If U.S. companies resume trade with Russia, European markets might retaliate, creating a deep divide between the U.S. and its European allies. Ukraine's position? Zelensky's growing isolation? Amid these geopolitical shifts, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky finds himself in an increasingly difficult position. His latest statements reveal a growing disconnect between Kyiv and its Western allies. Zelensky has rejected the idea of a quick peace deal, arguing that any settlement must include Ukraine's accession to the European Union and sustained Western military funding for an army of 800,000 soldiers. He has also demanded an additional 20 Patriot missile defense systems, a request that is widely considered unrealistic given Western stockpiles. Perhaps most controversially, Zelensky has insisted that frozen Russian assets should belong solely to Ukraine, rather than being shared with Western partners. This stance has raised concerns in Washington and European capitals, as it suggests Ukraine may be prioritizing its own financial recovery over broader strategic cooperation. Meanwhile, reports indicate that U.S. officials are considering reviving the Istanbul Agreements of 2022 as the basis for a peace deal. These agreements would require Ukraine to drastically reduce its military size, which contradicts Zelensky's push for an expanded army. This fundamental difference in approach suggests growing frustration among Western leaders with Ukraine's demands. While political battles unfold in Berlin, Washington, and Kyiv, the situation on the ground remains intensely volatile. One of the most significant developments in recent days has been Russia's advances in the Sudzha region. Over the past 24 hours, Russian forces have reportedly made major territorial gains, marking a strategic shift in the battle. Ukrainian forces attempted a counterattack, but were ultimately forced to retreat, allowing Russian troops to advance further. Key developments in the battle for Sudzha include Russian forces have secured positions in the western part of Lyubka, marking their first entry into this critical settlement. Heavy artillery and drone strikes have targeted Ukrainian defensive positions, forcing multiple withdrawals. Russian marine units are now completing the clearing of Kurilova, further tightening Moscow's control over key supply routes. These developments indicate that the encirclement of Ukrainian forces in Sudzha is becoming increasingly likely. If Russian forces successfully establish full control over the remaining supply roads, Ukrainian troops could be cut off entirely, leading to a large-scale surrender or withdrawal. Some analysts suggest that Ukraine may attempt a last-minute deal to negotiate the withdrawal of trapped forces in exchange for territorial concessions. However, with Russia's momentum growing, Moscow may reject such an offer and press forward with further offensives. As we enter the fourth year of this conflict, the stakes are higher than ever. Germany's new government signals potential escalation, while the United States appears to be shifting toward a diplomatic solution. Zelensky's increasingly isolated stance and Russia's battlefield advances in Sudzha paint a picture of a rapidly changing war. The coming months will likely determine whether Ukraine receives stronger European support or faces increasing pressure to negotiate from a position of weakness. Meanwhile, Russia's progress on the battlefield suggests that Moscow is far from backing down. One thing is certain, this war is not over, and as new political realities take shape, the path forward remains deeply uncertain. As we enter the fourth year of this war, the battlefield remains as intense as ever. Ukraine continues to fight for its sovereignty, but internal divisions between Kyiv and its Western allies are becoming increasingly evident. The shift in Germany's political landscape signals stronger support for Ukraine, yet potential tensions with both Russia and even the United States could complicate the situation further. Meanwhile, Russia maintains its offensive momentum, making significant territorial advances in Sudzha, tightening the noose around Ukrainian forces. With supply lines disrupted and logistical challenges mounting, Ukraine faces one of its most difficult military situations to date. The geopolitical landscape is also shifting rapidly. The United States appears more focused on diplomatic solutions, with signals that negotiations could become a priority. However, Ukraine remains defiant, pushing for continued Western military support and security guarantees. This growing divide could have major consequences in the months ahead. The destruction of key infrastructure, such as bridges and gas production facilities, further weakens Ukraine's position, making the war even more unpredictable. Where does this all lead? Will Ukraine manage to turn the tide with continued Western backing, or will Russia's strategy force Kyiv into difficult compromises? The coming months could determine the future of this war, and possibly reshape global geopolitics. If you found this analysis insightful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the latest developments. What are your thoughts on the evolving situation? Leave a comment below and let's discuss. Stay informed, stay engaged, and I'll see you in the next update.